podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Ed, you're not very well, I'm given to understand.
Well, yeah, got a bit of a cold. It might well be Hernandez-itis after my bold prediction that there's absolutely no way that Javier Hernandez would go to Real Madrid or United would let Danny Welbeck go, because that would be mental. Capital letters, exclamation, exclamation.
Unless they're planning to get another striker in. Did we say that? I'm not sure.
I think we might have said that, but I'm not sure that any of us saw Radamel Falcao in the offing, did we?
So let's just start with that. Why not? Start at the end and work backwards. It was the night before Christmas, the night before transfer deadline day. I was on Twitter too late at night, and Tancredi Palmieri, noted buffoon,
troll,
started tweeting, Falcao to MUFC looks like it really might be happening. And of course, everyone roundly mocked him, and I sort of just burst out laughing at the very concept that a football person could be talking about this. But then 24 hours later, or a little bit more than 24 hours later, he was a Manchester United player. What the heck happened?
Well, yeah, those in the know, apparently not us, claim that United had been looking at Falcao for some time, and in fact had thought about making a bid last summer and ditched it. And had thought about making a bid earlier in the summer and only accelerated their moves once it was known that Manchester City and Arsenal were interested. It seems a little dodgy to me, that one. I think this was another opportunistic move by United and by a chief executive who's somewhat obsessed with the marketing value of players. He sees them as assets in a global game to bring in sponsors. Fair enough, on the pitch, he's an outstanding forward, one of the finest strikers in world football, notwithstanding what's happening to his knee. We'll find out whether he's truly fit again. But pace, skill, fantastic touch, brilliant with either foot. You really couldn't tell which foot is his strongest. Great in the air, movement is superb, technically outstanding. Fox in the box, he doesn't really assist anything at all, but he scores well over a goal every 2 games in every level of play, and it's a great move for United.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I always think of when I think of Falcao is that Europa League final between Athletic Bilbao and Atletico Madrid, when Bilbao had absolutely destroyed us on their route to that, and Herrera played, of course. We got 2 players from that, probably the 2 best players in that game, right? No, maybe not. But Falcao was just on a totally another level in that game. And really, who is there other than Ronaldo or Messi who you would say, assuming his knee is up to scratch, we could have bought a better player in the world than this?
Yeah, I mean, he's right up there in the top echelon of players in world football, and only available because Monaco's Russian billionaire owner has seemingly fallen out of love with the game after he had to pay the French Football League a bribe, effectively, in order for Monaco to be able to continue with their tax-free status. It's an interesting turn of events. So they sold James Rodriguez to Real Madrid, obviously, in the summer, and it was sort of known in the last 24, 48 hours before the window closed that Falcao was also available. Lots and lots of clubs offered him. United, apparently the only team that was prepared to meet the terms, which is exceedingly expensive. So £6 million transfer loan fee. So, it's funny people call it a loan. There aren't actually such a thing as a international loan. It's a 1-year contract, effectively, and for which United paid £6 million, although Monaco are paying part of his taxes. So Monaco are going to be netting out a zero for this, effectively, and United are picking up the rest of his wages, which is in excess of £10 million a year. So it's a pretty expensive move by United, but it's going to look cheap if he scores the goals that fires United back into the Champions League.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we joke about marketing, but I'm sure that cost is offset to a degree, isn't it, by the marketing potential of a player like that, because it's not a £70 million purchase or whatever it would have been to actually buy him. There is an option to buy. I don't know if it's come out exactly how much that is, but
55 million euros, yeah, which is in the low 40s, and they'll take off the fee they've paid this year. So it's going to cost United another £35 million or so to make it permanent, or turn the 1-year contract into a 4-year contract. And if he's as good as he used to be, that'll be well worth the money indeed.
So yeah, I mean, of course, the things that counting against him are the fact that we don't know how his knee's going to be. Presumably, a lot of talk about United's business arrangement being to do with FFP, but I would thought it's more knee than FFP, because I don't really understand what difference it makes in terms of United's spending. I guess there's a big outlay if we pay it up all at once, but doesn't it all get amortised and all that sort of thing?
Yeah. In fact, it does. In FFP, you amortise it out over the length of the contract. In fact, you start again if you sign a player up on a new contract, which is exactly what Manchester City have done with a bunch of their purchases recently. So it's cheaper to pay your players more money sometimes than by signing them up on a new contract earlier than it is by amortising out through the length of the contract. So it's to do with the 3-year rolling period, I suppose, if you believe that argument. Actually, United denied this one and said it wasn't an issue at all. So my back of a fag packet calculations came out around 150 million net spend this summer, but of course it's over a 3-year rolling period anyway. So last summer and next summer will also count, or the previous 2 summers will also count into that. So, and if they really need to lose some of the amortised spend, they just offer new contracts to the players.
Right, and that all makes sense. So it means that, to me, it seems like this is a loan to make sure that he is at his best again, which is extremely sensible for Manchester United, and not far off what they were trying to do with Vidal, if rumours are to be believed, that they were trying to get a structured deal and all that sort of thing, and that's what they've done with Falcao and Falcao's knee. So that sort of answers the question of why we've gone for him with his dodgy knee and we didn't go for Vidal, because Juventus were not up for that.
Yeah, and I guess we'll have the same question with Kevin Strootman in the winter as well, if those rumours are to be believed, that United are still in for him. So what is it with the players and dodgy knees that we keep going for? There's Ruud van Nistelrooy snapped his cruciate, didn't he, before he joined United, and eventually joined United. Owen Hargreaves famously had years and years of tendinitis in his knee. Now Vidal, Strootman and Falcao.
I think maybe it's just because lots of the best players in the world get knee problems, because being really good at football is quite bad on the knees, isn't it? So, talking of lots of the best players, Falcao not the signing anyone expected, because we've already got really good centre-forwards. What do you make of the whole Rooney, Van Persie, Falcao situation?
I think it's great to have competition in that area of the pitch. So if we're assuming that United is still going to play the 3-5-2, that's 2 strikers on the pitch, and since they've just let another 2 go, that's only 3 they have to play in those 2 positions. So on that calculation, United might actually be a bit light. I guess we assume that James Wilson is now number 4 in that sort of system. So I don't see this as a problem. I saw a million headlines saying, where will Falcao fit in? Well, it's not going to be at centre-back, mate. Let me give you a clue about that one. It's he'll fit in just fine. He's a world-class forward. And I would think the player at most risk there is Rooney, and because he's the player that's form is the worst, I suppose, or form on performances have deteriorated the most. He's also the player who's lost a bag of pace, which is why people are talking about him playing in midfield. Whether he can actually do that or not, I don't know. I mean, every time I've actually seen him play in midfield, he looks for the Hollywood ball all the time. He doesn't actually play it simple. I'm not sure he would be first choice in that midfield either, with Di Maria, Blinton, Herrera in there. So, but interesting times. Of course, Van Persie's not exactly had a great fitness record over the last few years either. So we can probably expect one or both of them to be injured at some point.
And the thing is that that was always my thing about Welbeck, that there'd be plenty of opportunities for him, given that one of the other 2 will be injured the whole time. But now it's pretty clear that was the whole Falcao thing and the Welbeck and Hernandez thing were all kind of intertwined, weren't they? I guess let's just get into it, shall we? Let's just get into the whole, what does this mean about Man United's spirit and all that kind of stuff that's been talked about in the last couple of days. And I think there's some valid questions and there's some valid discussion to be had. But I also think there's been a fairly enormous overreaction because of the symbolism of replacing Danny Welbeck with Falcao, which is essentially what we've done. I mean, that is replacing a local lad, etc., with a absolutely top-level superstar. And, to be completely rationalist about it, you would have to be completely barking mad not to think that Falcao's an upgrade on Danny Welbeck. All of this, of course, happens within the context that up until, Monday, he was my favourite player at United by miles, but nobody in their right mind thinks he's actually better than Falcao. But you wrote a really beautiful, eloquent thing on Twitter about how it's more than just about that. There is a fairly potent symbolic change that's happened with that switch.
Yeah, so look, Danny Welbeck, who while he was your favourite player, was apparently dreaming of moving to Arsenal, so he says.
Envisaging, that's very, very, very different. Headline writers said he was dreaming, he didn't.
Yes. I'm not sure it's a subtle difference. Anyway, he wanted to play for Arsenal, not United. You're dead to me, Danny. You was that guy, not anymore. So look, it's all of that. It's on the pitch. Falcao's a better player, so this is an upgrade for United. That's why United are paying 50 million for Falcao and receive 16 million for Danny Welbeck. It's market forces at work there. It's the market saying that Falcao's 3 times better than Danny Welbeck. I'm not quite sure that would play out, but hey, fair enough. But then the whole rest of it is about the symbolism of United ditching an academy player, probably the leading academy player of this cohort, for a global superstar in order to feed the machine of globalisation, which United are fully into. This is the brand economy these days, and United have seized upon that like almost no other football club on the planet. I think in the next set of results, 15-16, United will return to the top of the tree of the rich league, or the most revenues per club, almost certainly, given all the revenues piling in for United. And you need this kind of player in order to do that. You don't necessarily need the local academy player, which is the one that appeals to local fans, not the global base, right? And if you want a quick analogy for this one, just check the sort of sentiment of local United fans on Twitter versus the global base of Twitter United fans, and I think there's a very different reaction to selling Danny Welbeck. I think many fans just see him as a talent and a limited talent, and one that can be swapped out for a much better talent. It's a game of fantasy football. It's a game of Football Manager, and you just buy another one and you swap one out, and it doesn't really matter, does it? But when you feel it in the kind of context of United's history, it's a little bit different.
Yeah, and I mean, there are, of course, lots and lots and lots of local fans who don't rate Danny Welbeck. They are not in short supply by any means, as my Twitter mentions will confirm. And, ultimately, in my view, I think that the next few years of his career are going to show that he actually had a place at the top level of the game, and that it was a little bit short-sighted to sell him, but not so much short-sighted to sell him as short-sighted to kind of drive him to the point at which he didn't want to play there anymore. This is huge bias on my part, but I think Moyes is a huge part of this problem. I think the way Moyes basically disenfranchised Welbeck and kind of only turned to him in times of need, and then as soon as he wasn't needed, he just didn't. Moyes had no idea how to keep a squad happy. And so when he went to Van Gaal, and Van Gaal said, "No, you're going to have to fight for your place. You're not going to be an automatic first choice," Welbeck says, "No, I want out at this point." And I think that's really sad, and I think it's going to be a shame in the long run. I think it's also, there is a massive danger of overblowing the symbolism, right? Because Welbeck and Cleverley, it could be argued, have just not done enough to keep their place at United. And
well, no, that's fair enough. But it's not a case of overblowing the symbolism. I think that's that's to see football in at two extremes alone, right? And as we know, there are many shades in between. And Welbeck and Cleverley just weren't good enough. Fair enough, if United are going on a massive spending and upgrading many positions, midfield was one of them. And I think Moyes and Van Gaal after him identified the forwards as another. So they've upgraded both there. So unfortunately, Welbeck and Cleverley's a different kettle of fish.
Absolutely.
Well down the list. Welbeck would have got games this year, but they fell down the list of priorities, and as a result, each decided they wanted to move on. Right? Now, I don't think you can play these two arguments, and we've seen this quite a bit in the media, and they are trying to play two arguments opposite. One is United need to spend money in order to get back to the summit, and isn't it disgraceful that United are ditching their history by spending money in order to get back to the summit, right? So I'm afraid, you cannot play both of those. United needed to upgrade, and they've upgraded.
Yeah, and that's what I meant. By the way, I just want to make it very clear, I wasn't saying that you were overblowing the symbolism. I'm saying that I think the discussion has slightly overblown the symbolism, because
Sure.
the idea that somehow Manchester United won't be looking to their academy for players from here on in is just ridiculous. I mean, I know there's been extenuating circumstances, but Van Gaal's given first team debuts to 6 academy players in he did in his first 3 games.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, that it's not going to stop at United. And we have said time and time again on this show that the Glazers' reluctance to spend money on the first team has made us go further and further and further away from, you always say, like, are we closer to Barcelona? And then Bayern Munich came along and it's, are we closer to them? And the truth is, like, after this transfer window, it's the first time in a very long time we can look back at a transfer window and go, yes, we are closer to the elite level clubs, because our signings have been at the elite level, but not in a crazy Galacticos way. Falcao is the only one of those which is out on a limb. The Angel Di Maria signing is absolutely rational, sensible, addressing a need in the squad, all that kind of stuff. So's the Falcao one, if you look at it right, by the way, also.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. All right, so look, this is a question of balance. So moving on from Falcao, there was a piece by Martin Samuel in the Daily Mail, a classic piece of trolling by him, in which it basically said that, United were panicking and they bought all the wrong players and they bought a whole bunch of left backs, and Manchester City never did it like this. Joe, and it's a total load of nonsense, and I'm sure you've read it as well. So the point being that United this summer have bought a goalkeeper, albeit a 17-year-old, so he'll go into the reserve team, a 16-year-old defender, and then in terms of players that will go straight into the first team, a 20-year-old defender, or 19 when he joined, 24-year-old defender, 24-year-old midfielder, 26-year-old midfielder, 28-year-old forward. So a spread of ages and a spread of positions. That in the big picture looks like a balanced set of acquisitions. Some young and promising, some already established. Yes, most certainly there's a premium paid for a number of those players. So Shaw, because he's English and young and they're rare. Herrera, because United had to pay the premium to buy him out of his contract, otherwise he would have never moved. Di Maria, because United had to pay the premium to bring a Grade A player to a non-Champions League club. And Falcao, because, he joined the tax haven at Monaco, and I'm afraid anyone who wanted him had to pay that premium. So extraneous circumstances, but I guess United feel they can do it. So, you can categorise this in one way as Woodward rubbing his own ego and making sure that he's getting all these stars he wants for marketing, or it was a fairly balanced set of transactions.
And I think, as we were saying about the previous discussion, the truth, of course, is in the middle, right? That's because there's no doubt that Ed Woodward was freaking out with joy about us signing Falcao and Di Maria, especially after all the stick he got a few weeks ago. Pretty ill-timed stick, it turns out, actually, because you cannot argue that Ed Woodward has had a disastrous transfer window. I mean...
Not with the results, but you might say, aside from Shaw and Herrera that were fixed some time ago, the others look a bit odd. Di Maria very, very late in the window, Falcao at the very last moment, in fact, after the window had closed. And Blind, since this was a player that they'd obviously made the assumption they could sign at any point, very late in the window again, right? So it doesn't look like the strategy makes a lot of sense, and it feels a lot opportunistic, which is what a lot of people are picking up on in order to throw criticism Woodward's way.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing, right? That's the balance of it. It's not like he's suddenly become a football executive in God, That's not what's happened, although, of course, the cult of Woodward will grow as a result of this, which is really unfortunate, because it's all fun and games until someone points out that he's the man that orchestrated the leveraged buyout. Ed Woodward is basically living out, I think I said this a couple of weeks ago, but he's living out childhood fantasy on the basis of having stolen the club. So he's not one of the good guys, even though he seems like reasonably personable and stuff. Anyway, all that all that aside, let's go back to talking about the transfers, because on the last day there was a ton of activity. Welbeck out. I mean, loads of people really genuinely upset about that. I must admit, that is as sad as I've been about anything in football for a really long time. You know, I always go on about how, you know, you made fun of me last week for doing my whole "it's only football" bit, but, you know, the Welbeck departure actually was a little difficult to take, and, you know, lots of people going, "Oh, how are we ever going to get over it?" And you'll get over it fine. We've all lost players we loved. You know, that happened. Remember when Cantona retired?
Well, yeah. But look, this will make it easier. I've envisaged myself playing in this team before. For it to finally happen is very exciting. I really do believe that coming to Arsenal is the right decision, right? So this is something that Welbeck pushed for. So it's sad that he's gone. In the end, I think the player had the decision. So,
oh yeah, for sure.
Van Gaal's very straight about this. He said, I'm sure, you know, paraphrasing here, Welbeck, your third or fourth choice, mate. Third choice. Fourth choice, probably. Rooney, Van Persie, Falcao. Make your own decision up. And he's made the sensible one there and gone so well. I hope he plays. I mean, he'll certainly play up front for a while because Giroud's out, and although a lot of the talk is that Wenger would like to use Sanchez down the middle, I think that Welbeck will get an opportunity to play down the middle to start with, and that's his opportunity to make that spot his own.
I mean, it's a fantastic move for him. It seems pretty odd, to be honest, that we would be happy to sell him to Arsenal, and I suspect that's probably why that deal went right down to the wire, to see if there was anywhere else who could get him to go, because it does very much directly strengthen a rival. He's just going to be perfect for their style, you know, and it's the ideal club for him to go to in that sense. You know, he grew up really admiring. I think all this talk of it, the envisaging him playing there, it all comes back to the fact that he was a big Thierry Henry fan growing up, as well he should have been, you know, as a young striker. I think if you'd given him a choice between being the star striker at Arsenal and the star striker at Manchester United, I don't think he would have chosen to move to London under those circumstances. Maybe, though, if you gave Hernandez the choice between being star striker at Manchester United and star striker at Real Madrid, he might have picked Madrid as his destination. How on earth have they taken him off our hands?
Well, again, Van Gaal has seen him as sort of fourth choice. So
I don't mean how on earth have we got rid of him. I mean, how on earth has he ended up at Real Madrid?
They need another striker. They just don't have that many on the books, and they didn't want to do the deal for Falcao, it seems. So his agent has said didn't want to stump up the money there. Hernandez, much cheaper option. He won't be starting the game, so he's going to go from bit part player at United to bit part player at Real Madrid. I'm not sure that's going to suit him particularly well, but there you go. He'll score goals in Spain, of course he will. And he'll also be offside an awful lot in Spain and not contribute much to the general all-round play in Spain. And he'll be just the same player, but if he gets games, he'll score goals. But Madrid playing a very flexible way up front, don't they? And I'm not sure he's going to get in the side ahead of Benzema. So when you talk about Benzema, Bale, Ronaldo and James Rodriguez all being fit, Hernandez isn't getting in that side.
No, but I guess there'll be lots of times when they are not all fit, and he'll get a game, and I hope he does well there. You know, he's a very likeable character for his first couple of seasons at United, and kind of don't really blame him for turning last season, because he was handled extremely poorly by old Moisey again. You know, I'm not at all sad about Hernandez leaving. I know a lot of people are, because he's very lovable, and, you know, I enjoyed his lovability, but actually he went pretty snidey last season, didn't he? You know. Well,
he went a bit passive-aggressive with his Twitter and Instagram feed. So, he was obviously clearly frustrated, and that has boiled over into him taking a move that might not be the best for him. I'm a little surprised he didn't push for a move to a club where he'd started all the time, but I suppose when Madrid come calling, it's not that surprising. What it does mean, of course, is that James Wilson, I assume, is going to be sort of fourth choice. He might get a few games this season. There's not going to be that much football. United don't play in anything other than the Premier League until January, and that's when we get knocked out by some third division cloggers.
By then, we'll just be purring our way towards the league title.
Yeah, well, maybe so, yeah. So, but not a lot of games, basically, so Wilson didn't go out on loan. Some other players did, and so we'll see with him. You know, if he's not got a game by January, then that might be the time for him to go out on loan somewhere. A couple other departures. Tom Lawrence went to Leicester permanently.
Yeah.
A 4-year contract. And Nick Powell also went to Leicester, but on a loan, which suggests that the club still feel that there's a chance for him to make it.
Yeah, absolutely. Great move for Tom Lawrence. I mean, fantastic. Lovely when academy products get that Premier League move, isn't it? And I think he'll be a great acquisition for Leicester. So that's not, somebody described it on Twitter as a ruthless from Van Gaal to get rid of him, but I just think it's actually perfectly reasonable. United have got, as you say, not many games and plenty of players in attacking positions. Not a good place to be coming through. Great for him. Great for Nick Powell to get that year's loan as well. So
he's got to make the most of it. Yeah, it's probably Nick Powell's last chance. So Tom Lawrence, I'm not that surprised. I mean, to be honest, I said on the pod at the end of last season when he had a couple of games that I was a little surprised that he'd got this far at United. And so there you go. I think we'll see whether he can make it in the Premier League at Leicester. Not guaranteed.
No, but I think he's got a good chance. And I think Nick Powell, there's all the attitude stuff, isn't there? Drink driving, few other rumours doing the rounds. So, yeah, he's got to really knuckle down. And another player who left, even though it did not look like he had left, it looked like he had somehow survived the transfer window. But not only does, Sky, like, if you're not in the UK, you might not get this, but Sky News becomes intolerable on deadline day, and all day long they've got this ticker counting down to 11 p.m. and then it goes off and they show Big Ben and nothing changes because everyone's got extensions to keep on doing deals. And Tom Cleverley's deal was ratified lunchtime yesterday or Tuesday as we record this. Tom Cleverley off to Aston Villa on loan, having tried to get to Everton. That didn't work out.
Yes. Many barriers on all sides. Villa, the only club that were prepared to pay the fee that United wanted. Cleverly wanting higher wages than Villa were prepared to pay. So it's all a little bit strange. So he's gone there on loan. United have the option to pull him back. And Villa have the option to buy him permanently. Of course, he's out of contract next summer anyway. Although I think given his age, United would get some kind of fee for him anyway. But so it won't be much. Anyway, low millions. And another chance for Cleverley, I guess. He certainly wasn't going to be in Van Gaal's plans. He'll always have pre-season when he was captain for a game. That'll be the highlight of his United career. It never took off in the way that it should. He was unlucky with injuries. He was less unlucky with bravery, because I think that was part of the problem. I don't mean physical bravery. I think bravery in terms of his passing. He just got very, very passive as a player. Makes almost no key passes, and he's just not become the player that many people thought he would be sort of 5 years ago.
No, Doran Solomon wrote a lovely article about this for Stretford, and my problem with the way that people analyse him is that they take what you've just said and they basically turn that into hate for Cleverley. It's the same with Darren Gibson, hounded off social media by United fans, products of our academy. And actually, when it comes down to the culture of United, the problem isn't just how the club's acting, but it's also how the fans are acting. And it isn't as if that is just fans around the world, but that's local fans too. That's people in the ground, the Valencia friendly, jeering Fellaini's every touch. That's Tom Cleverley being basically applauded off the pitch. Not well done, but we're glad you're leaving in the Norwich game. So that's happening in the ground. And there is there's a cultural problem that, because
didn't used to be like that.
No, you said something about the academy and the quality of the academy and the quality of the work they're doing. But one of the problems is that as soon as they get into the first team, they're thrown to the Lions. And it almost happened to Darren Fletcher, but Darren Fletcher has almost superhuman mental strength, as we've seen from him coming back from illness in the way he has. So I think that the culture of demanding of instant success is the biggest obstacle and impediment to the young players coming through.
It's a fair analysis. Also, Tom Cleverley had Darren Fletcher's mental strength. He might still be at United. He might have been more successful. But I guess those are all the things that make up a top-level footballer, right? And Cleverley had a few deficiencies. And while I agree with you that the criticism of him crossed the line from objectivity into personal attack, I just don't think he was good enough for United. So in the end, that makes a lot of sense. United moving him on, a lot of sense for the player too. But he was one of, something like 15 players that have left United this summer since we were on departures. I mean, we talked about Powell going. Enriquez went, of course, playing in Croatia this year. A bit weird, that one. Bebe finally left permanently. Nani left on loan. Ferdinand, Vidic and Evra all left or were given free transfers. One player who didn't leave, who after 7 years at the club is still stealing a wage, is Anderson, How on earth is Anderson still a Manchester United player?
Anderson, son, he's a transfer magician. Anderson, son, his contract goes on and on. It's unbelievable. He's just... I mean, it's clear that just nobody wanted him. That's the thing. At a boy called Young on Twitter, tweeting on transfer deadline day, today is so much like Football Manager. I'm expecting Anderson's contract to be terminated by mutual consent. But it was not, because that isn't a thing that happens in real life. But if it was Football Manager, he definitely would have been. How many games are you going to play this season, barring catastrophic midfield injuries? 1, 2?
Yeah, not many. I mean, although, look, if we're making the assumption that there's going to be sort of 3 midfielders, 1 attacking, 1 defensive and 1 all-rounder, then I guess he could get into that all-rounder's position if we have a few injuries. So, you know, in that sort of competitive dynamic is Blint, Herrera, Fletcher, Di Maria, Mata, and I guess Rooney if there's some thought about moving him a bit further back, and then Anderson will come after that.
I'm so depressed by talk of Rooney in midfield. It's just... Well, the one thing that kind of is heartening is he's only going to try it 3 times, right, before he completely gives up on it as a completely unworkable idea.
Yes. I mean, as I mentioned earlier, I think I'm not convinced that he can play there. I know a lot of people think he can, but I think that's just an assumption based on some of his skill set. So I think his problem when he's playing at number 10 is he's not really number 10. He doesn't dictate the tempo of the game. His first touch is horrendous. I'm not sure that he really sees all the spaces. He does get great numbers, of course, but he doesn't really play like a number 10. He plays like a sort of deep-lying forward. When he plays further back in midfield, I think his tendency is to hit early ball all of the time. So I'm not sure he plays a lot of simple passes. So could you play him behind Mata or Di Maria as one of the 2? I'm not sure about that. So we'll see. I mean, it'll all play out in the rest of the season, whether he's a member of that kind of midfield sort of quintet, or maybe 6 players who are going to compete for positions there. One of them I'm pretty sure is not going to compete for too many games is Anderson, though. Very, very odd that he's still at the club, even given that a lot of clubs didn't want him. Porto apparently turned down the opportunity to take him. So there you go. He's going to be at the club for 1 final year. Maybe he'll go out on loan in the winter again, and that'll be it for Anderson.
Yeah, absolutely. I like our kind of policy of just sending back people to where we got them from if we don't like them anymore.
It's a Daily Mail policy, that, is it? Get back to where you came from.
The thing about the Rooney criticism is I feel like, in the interest of balance, we've pretty much passed over a lot of the Van Persie criticism too, because he's barely had a good game in the last 6 months, and it's clearly about fitness with him. There was a lot of rumours doing the rounds that he needed a knee operation, but he's denied that, so who knows what the situation is there. Presumably, you can take him at his word about that. I don't see why he'd lie about it if it's the case. There is a bit of a difference between bad Rooney and bad Van Persie, though, which is that bad Van Persie tends to make sense. You can sort of know why that's happening, and there's some sort of assumption that he's going to come back to fitness. But I think Rooney will get plenty of games as a centre forward, you know. But in a partnership with Falcao, Rooney is inherently going to be the one who's the more creative centre forward, and that is a bit of a shame, because it is nice when Rooney can be the player whose only job it is to get goals, because that's what he's best at.
Yes, well, I mean that's because of some of those problems I just mentioned. Of course, him having lost a yard of pace also means that it loses some of its edge up front. I think it's a pretty key season for Rooney. We'll see. You know, it's could be one in which he transitions out of being a permanent member of the side, although maybe not. You know, we'll see. Up to him in the way. You'd think that Van Gaal comes with a reputation for not playing on other people's reputations too much, and we'll see how long that takes to play out. Elsewhere, our new signings in defence, sure, we've not seen much of yet because of injury. Rojo we've seen nothing of, still hasn't got a work permit. We're told that he will get it at some point, just because he's the Argentinian Tony Soprano and goes around smashing people over the head with bottles doesn't mean he shouldn't get a work permit, right? And then in the final hours of the window, a new defender stroke defensive midfielder stroke anything else stroke ladies man pin-up model Daley Blind joined from Ajax for £14 million.
Remarkable cheekbones. Absolutely remarkable. And I say this, you know, purely as aesthetic appreciation, but My goodness, what a set of cheekbones he's got on him. If he can play half as good as he can pose for extremely well put together photographs to make him look handsome, then we're going to be just fine.
Yeah, well, there's a man who doesn't mind nude pictures of himself floating around the internet.
No, slightly different. You've consistently said he's going to be great, a yard of pace short of being very outstanding. I mean, a fantastic signing. That one, makes all kinds of sense. Look at the price, 14 million just seems bang on the money reasonable. Of course, it's crazy to talk about that money as reasonable, but that just seems like the fee we should be paying for a player like that. Can play in all sorts of positions. Van Gaal knows him inside out and loves him to bits. There is no doubt in my mind that Van Gaal will at some point give an interview about what a fantastic human being Daley Blind is. And yeah, I mean, I'm excited. I think it's a wonderful signing for the balance. And also, it sort of makes this idea that all we're doing is signing up Galacticos look even more laughable.
Well, yeah.
We've bought the Dutch John O'Shea.
The Dutch John O'Shea, yeah. I think it's a good signing for the squad. What I do think it leaves United feeling is just a little bit lightweight in midfield. So if you think a three of Daley Blind, Angel Di Maria and a Herrera, it might feel a bit lightweight. So there isn't that physical presence. They did want to bring in Arturo Vidal, couldn't get it done. Looked at bringing William Carvalho in, who does provide a physical presence. Wasn't very good, Carvalho. I don't know whether you saw the Lisbon derby the other day. He didn't have a very good game. Maybe they passed over him because they didn't think he was quite ready for United, and so as a result, we'll play out the season without that kind of physical presence. And it does mean that United are quite a small side as well. And we'll see whether that affects us in some games.
Yeah, more, tiki-taka coming, isn't it? That's going to be the antidote.
Well, let's hope so, because it was all Route 1 against Burnley.
Yes, quite. Brilliant question on the subject of Rooney that just came up a minute ago. LA Sebastian 10 said, in all seriousness, is it weird that our captain and vice-captain are probably the worst players in their positions? Very harsh on Fletch, that. Fletch is still much better than Anderson in terms of his capacity to provide an all-round contribution. But yeah, there's definitely an argument that Rooney is the third best of the three centre-forwards.
There most certainly is, but anytime I mention anything like that, I get a bag full of hate mail. So, yes, he's the third best of our three centre-forwards.
Yeah, absolutely. So, another player that went out, Shinji Kagawa, has been freed. He's returned to he's quite literally returned to the loving embrace of Jurgen Klopp. If you've seen the vine of them two meeting again.
Yes,
yeah,
big
hug
to
the eye.
Yes, very, very cheap, though. I mean, talk about good value for money there. €8 million for Shinji Kagawa, £5.5 million or so. Super value for money. I mean, he's only gone for $1 million more than Alexander Butner went for. Interesting that, because he had a long time left on his contract, so I guess that's just a reflection of the fact that he just didn't do much at United, but I don't think United have cashed into the full value there. No,
and I'm a fully paid up member of the Shinji Kagawa Defence Force, so you can't take anything I say about this subject seriously. I desperately wanted him to succeed at United because I just love the way he plays football, but it has definitively not happened. So that's a permanent transfer, is it? That's not a season-long loan like everything else.
No, that's a permanent transfer. Yep, he's gone, never to return.
Okay, well, anyway, I'm happy for him and for Jurgen to renew their beautiful friendship, and he can bring him back with him when he takes over from Van Gaal in 5 years' time. So yeah, other significant outgoings, I think we've covered them all at various different stages. We talked a lot earlier this week's show about Angel Di Maria and what a fantastic signing it is. I mean, to me, that is the signing of the window, maybe for anyone anywhere. I'd head over heels with that signing. I think it's phenomenal, and I think there's very little doubt he's going to be a superstar at United.
I think he will be. I think even in the sort of hour and a bit that he got for United against Burnley, he showed that he's a class above. I think as soon as he settles in and the team kind of gels, because it will take a while now, because a lot of new faces to fit into that side in a new system, then he's going to be a great signing for United. Then we can, instead of reading all the articles about how United are ripping their history apart by buying players, we'll read articles about how United are buying success.
Yes, absolutely. It is laughable, the press response to United, isn't it? It is, as you say, they spent the whole time talking about how United desperately needed to invest at a higher level in order to compete in Europe, and they'd let themselves slip, and all that was perfectly accurate, but now they've actually spent it. They just don't like it, do they? The only one that's the exception, shout out to the H-Dog, Henry Winter, with basically an article just saying that United have bought brilliant players, and that's brilliant. So good on the H-Dog for that one.
Yeah, very good. Well, a quick review of our competitors' purchases, because it's relevant. So, Arsenal have finally bought themselves a striker in Danny Welbeck. It'll be interesting. I don't think there's any guarantee of success with that one, but he'll certainly score some goals for them. Chelsea bought Costa and Fabregas and Felipe Luis. Everyone seems to make the assumption that they've done the best business. They certainly bought the players they needed to buy in the positions they needed to buy them in. They look pretty formidable. Manchester City, kind of underwhelming transfer window for them in a way, wasn't it? So on the last day they sent Micah Richards out on loan to Fiorentina. Slightly odd one, that one, but left Scott Sinclair in the squad just to play, I don't know, I think it's UEFA homegrown status position, which basically means he won't play a game all season. And they bought Fernando to go alongside Fernandinho in midfield. So, they haven't done a lot of business. Sent Negredo away to Valencia, of course. Big money there, 25 million euros. So it doesn't feel like they've massively upgraded their squad over the summer. Mangala will see how he fits in. He's still a bit raw, I think, for the money they paid. Liverpool swapped one nutcase for another nutcase, Suarez for Balotelli. If he fulfills his sort of talent and potential at Liverpool and doesn't go mental, £16 million is going to look very, very cheap for Balotelli. And I suppose it's a risk they could take. Still, you wonder whether those 30-odd goals that Suarez scored will be enough to drop them out the Champions League places. Anyway, I think the net of all of this is that it's going to be a very tight battle. I do think Chelsea are favourites. I think Manchester City are second favourites. But I think Liverpool, Arsenal and United are very well matched for those last Champions League places.
Yeah, and I think that actually Arsenal's is more viable. If it wasn't for Arsenal never falling out of the top four, like ever, I would be thinking that their place is much more vulnerable than Liverpool. I don't know, I don't agree with you generally about the quality of Liverpool's transfer window. I think they brought in Moreno, they brought in a bunch of squad players that will improve their squad, and like three players that will improve their first team, and they've got Sterling another year on in his development, Coutinho another year on in his. Okay, Gerrard is going to be increasingly a problem, but I think they've had a pretty fantastic transfer window, because also Balotelli is a much more manageable problem than Suarez, because when he's a problem and you leave him out the side, and then when he's not, he's not,
Well, I guess that's true. It's the inconsistency in the performances and the fact that he disappears in some games that's the bigger problem, rather than the setting his house on fire with fireworks or whatever else he does. But, I tell you what, I'd rather have Di Maria and Falcao or Balotelli and Adam Lallana. It's not a debate, is it?
No, I mean, United have had the best transfer window out of anyone, because Chelsea's need has been addressed in a very good way, and they've had a very good transfer window too, but they weren't in quite as dire straits as we were. United have had a transfer window that's rebuilt the squad to the core, really. I spent all last season arguing that the squad didn't need a major overhaul, and it has in fact got one.
Yes, and wonderful quote from Van Gaal in a Dutch newspaper today, where and it came with all exclamations, which of course, it didn't when he said it, although he does have a tendency to talk in exclamations, I think.
Yeah.
He said, I had a problem at Bayern, and this was in 2010. They'd only got 2 draws out of their first 3 games, and Uli Hoeneß called me into the office to explain what I did. He said, I've had a problem here, and the club just kept buying, and then they just kept buying more. And it feels like they have great faith in me, which is a nice quote and a nice summary of where United are. So you can characterise this as panic and desperation to retain the status, and the fact that the squad had been degraded to the point that all this money was spent. And, in some respects, all of that is true. But it's also true that they found a man that they do believe is the right man to instigate this change. And they've backed him. The club have backed him with lots and lots and lots of money to do it. Now it's all up to Van Gaal. He's got the tools. He might be missing a central defender and a tough tackling midfielder, but he's got most of the tools to make sure United qualify for the Champions League this season.
Yeah, I had to do a thing grading United's transfer window and giving each of the players a letter grade, and I gave the transfer window as a whole an A-, which is a pretty fantastic result for a United transfer window. We haven't had an A- level transfer window since 2008, I don't think. It's not an A+ because we didn't sign Vidal and Hummels. I don't mean literally, but those equivalents. But everything else has been addressed. So great, you can't get it all right, can't all work out. And, I'm less worried about centre-half than other people are, because we bring in 2 defenders. Obviously Luke Shaw's not a central defender, but Rojo can play there. And there's a lot of talk about how we haven't replaced Ferdinand and Vidic. And I can't remember if I've said this on the podcast before, so I apologise if it's a repetition. But we have replaced Ferdinand and Vidic. It hasn't come to fruition yet, and it might never do. But Jones and Smalling were brought in for that exact job. They were brought in as transitional players to bring through to that level, and it remains to be seen whether they'll achieve that. My sort of heart suggests that Phil Jones will and Chris Smalling won't, but I wouldn't write either of them off or on yet.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair enough. So there you go, A- for the transfer window. Yeah, I might go for a B+, because I think there's too many question marks over too many players to say it's definitely in the A category yet. So I think lots of good players. We'll see how Shaw develops. We'll see whether Rojo is any good at this level, because he's certainly not been tested and in central defence against Premier League standard strikers. Daley Blind, we'll see whether his pace is a problem. Under Herrera, he's got to stamp his authority on games in a way he hasn't done quite yet. And Falcao
in the 60 minutes of Premier League football he's had.
Yeah. Well, and in the pre-season 6 or 7 games that he featured in too, not saying he won't, but he hasn't yet. And Falcao will see about his knees. So there's plenty of question marks to go with the this feels very exciting. And, you bring 5 players in, not all of them are going to work out. So I think it's fair to say that someone of these 5 players will not work out. And we'll see who it is in the year to come.
Yeah, absolutely. I almost don't like to do this, but who's your guess?
So I think the one that's most risky is Rojo.
Yeah.
I think he's a fine player, and he had a very, very good World Cup at left back and left wing back. He's played most of his football in the centre of defence for Sporting last season. It's a big leap from the Portuguese league to the Premier League, and it's going to be a very steep learning curve for him. So I think that's the one where he might find it a little difficult in the first year. I think the rest of them, it will be much more natural. And Di Maria's so classy, he shouldn't have a problem at all.
Yeah, and Falcao, keep coming back to this, but if it wasn't for the question mark about his knee, this is signing Ronaldo or Messi. This is signing an unattainably brilliant footballer. He's in the absolute elite. In that season that Atletico won the Europa League, Sid Lowe every week on the Guardian podcast was talking about how Falcao's the best player in the league. He's playing better than Ronaldo or Messi. And, there isn't a higher compliment than that, is there? It's just ridiculous. I really hope that his mobility isn't affected, because the last thing we need is another brilliant but slightly immobile centre-forward.
Yeah, so there you go. That's the transfer window that was. We can start speculating about the January transfer window now, can't we? Because apparently United have, so rumours say, lined up bids for Hummels and Strootman already. So there you go. That would turn it from a B to an A+++++.
Brilliant.
Plus. And we would have also have a team that looks very, very different than it did 18 months ago. And I suppose that's what, in the end, most fans were saying, that investment was needed. That yes, Moyes was a problem, but when you bring in a coach of Van Gaal's obvious credentials, and he also says that there's a problem, which he has done privately, and he's admitted that, then investment was needed, and the club have put up the cash, and now it's up to Van Gaal to make all that cash into success on the pitch. And there's no better man to do it, and if Van Gaal can't do it, I don't think anyone else could. So there we go, onwards and upwards, I think.
Yeah, absolutely, onwards and upwards too. Given that we've got a bit of time this week because there's no games to talk about, we've got hundreds of Twitter questions. We won't do hundreds, but let's do a couple of extra. So at Maz_man_UTD says, do we have the highest percentage of left-footed players ever assembled?
Yeah, 12 I think it is at the moment. So you can definitely put a team together without the goalkeeper of left-footers. So we've got Shaw and Rojo at the back. Evans is two-footed, although right-footed mainly, so he doesn't count. Daley Blind, obviously. Di Maria. Mata is a left-footer. Falcao is two-footed, but tell me when he strikes one in from 35 yards with his left foot that he's not left-footed. Van Persie, obviously. Blackett. Who else? Am I missing anyone? 12 I counted, anyway.
Yeah, something like that. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head. What foot's Herrera?
He's right-footed.
All right, there you go.
And Anderson is left-footed as well. So, although you might say he has two left feet.
Well, that would be a good thing in his case because he's left-footed. So one departure we didn't mention that's just come through today, bizarrely enough, proving furthermore that the Sky countdown's ridiculous. But Guillermo Herrera has gone to Real Madrid on loan. I don't understand what that's all about, but...
Guillermo Herrera, yes, a surprising one, no doubt. A man who didn't always look like he'd make it at United. I wouldn't say he has starred in the reserves by any means so far. Good luck to him.
Yeah, absolutely. It'd be really interesting to see what happens. One person we haven't talked about, Aaron Sohal, asks, should we have loaned out Adnan Januzaj too? And I think no, ultimately, especially not if we're going to play a 4-3-3. But out of the whole of United's squad, apart from maybe Rooney, he's the one who the transfer window has had the biggest effect on of people that have stayed, because there's a lot of players that want to play in the same positions he want to play.
Well, yes. So in the number 10 role, Mata, and on the left side, Di Maria, and up front, Falcao. So, in the last sort of 12 months or so, spent a lot of money in positions that Januzaj would want to play. And he's got talent enough to slot into all sorts of different positions. But yeah, the window has been a bit of a problem for him. Should we have sent him out on loan? No, because he's too talented to let him play elsewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. And 4-3-3 with Falcao up the middle, Rooney and Van Persie on the bench, Di Maria on one side and Januzaj on the other side sounds really, really good to me. At VJ_Rajan1 says, as great as Falcao's signing is, do you think LVG has dropped the tombola and formed the Manchester United donut? Worryingly poor centre midfield and defence. And I actually really disagree with the notion that we're worryingly poor in either of those positions now. I think that we are a little short and we maybe lack the perfect blend, but we've bought 3 central midfielders in this transfer window. If you include Blint and Di Maria as central midfielders, which they definitely both are,
Yeah.
So
I think the analysis is the one I said before. We're lacking an experienced central defender because Smalling, Jones, and Evans all have a tendency towards injury, and Smalling and Jones haven't progressed in the way that we'd have liked them to progress. Jones's early performances this season are positive, aren't they? Not so much Smalling, who's of course injured again, and Rojo, we don't know how he'll develop, and I just suspect there's a learning curve there. So short at defence, I think. In midfield, just a little bit lightweight, as I said before, just missing that physical presence still. So I don't think it's worryingly poor, but a little bit short, and those shortages tend to play out, especially in the bigger games.
Yeah, although I feel like we're less short there than we've been, not in defence, but we're less short in midfield by a hell of a long way than we've been in a hell of a long time. So that's I just don't think the donut is in effect in the same way. If anything, it's now no, I can't think of any good analogy. It's an upside down cake or something, There's just too much up front and in the middle, and maybe slightly not enough at the back. Okay, at Machine Gun says, why'd you never have me on the Rantcast? Because you're too busy on the football flush, Mo. Which you should listen to the Football Flush, by the way. It's excellent. And then he asks, who would win a fight between Rooney, Falcao and Van Persie? And who would you want to win? I'm pretty sure, although I think Van Persie would fight very dirty indeed, Rooney would still win a fight between the three of them, right?
Well, Rooney's got that kind of scouse street fighter in him. Van Persie's just too nice. He's a pretty boy.
No, he's not. Van Persie is not nice. Van Persie is well snide.
Well, he might be snide, but I'm not sure he's a fighter. Falcao, though, is Colombian. Yeah, Shining Path and all that. I'm just going to go for the full stereotype here.
Yeah, El Tigre. Maybe El Tigre would win. I think I'd want Van Persie to win the fight, but it's fair to say that Falcao might win my fickle heart round. I'd want Danny Welbeck to win the fight. No, not anymore. He's left us. At Lucas_MUTD says, why is Mike Phelan so bitter? I don't think he's bitter necessarily. He's just a bit... I don't know. He gave a lot of United are abandoning their traditions quotes, and in a way, it is. Although I don't agree with him, it is understandable because he worked with Welbeck since he was a tiny little lad, and I'm sure a lot of people associated with the club are quite sad to see it happen, and a lot of people will associate it with Ferguson being gone and new traditions being in place. So I think that we'll call that a show. Our transfer predictions were pretty vastly wrong, and it's all very different. Last question for you, Ed. This is from Rantcast listener at UTD Rantcast. That's me. How are we going to line up? What is the 11 going to be against QPR on the 14th? I'm going to that game. I'm ridiculously excited about it. What am I going to see on the pitch at kickoff?
I think Well, obviously De Gea is going to be in there. I think the back three is probably going to be something along the lines of Jones, Evans and Smalling and or Blackett, depending on fitness. I'm not sure that Rojo will play straight away. He might not be quite ready yet, since he spent 2 weeks in the Madrid embassy doing his best impression of Julian Assange at the moment. And then I don't think Shaw's quite ready yet. Though he's back in training, so maybe he'll start against QPR. That's an option. Rafael, I'm not sure if he's fit yet. So again, that's probably a Tony Valencia. I think he'll throw Blint straight in there to play alongside Herrera and Di Maria, and it'll be Van Persie and Rooney up front, and Falcao will come off the bench to score the winner.
Okay, nice. Well, I look forward to that. I think I'd be inclined to suggest that Falcao might start that game, but we'll see. Very exciting times anyway. Confusing times, unsettling times. I don't blame anyone for being worried, but I'm currently not worried. I think the club's in pretty good hands in terms of its leadership, and hopefully, and I mean Van Gaal, I don't mean the higher ranked up leadership, and hopefully the succession planning, some lessons will be learnt, and the team will be in place that mishandled the previous transition, and they'll get this next transition right in 5 years' time or 3 years' time or whatever, and things will look rosy. So we are not doing a podcast now for 2 weeks, so you won't get one this Monday just coming now, and there won't be one after the QPR game. It'll be the week after that. If you want to get hold of us in the meantime, you can get me at UTD Rantcast on Twitter. You can get Ed at United Rant. You can get us both at facebook.com/United Rant and the show page at unitedrant.co.uk. If you want to help out with the cost of the show and chuck in a tip in our direction, much appreciated everyone that's done that. unitedrant.co.uk/donate. And we'll see you in a couple of weeks' time.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
We interrupt this program to bring you an important Wayfair message. Wayfair's got style tips for every home. This is Styles McKenzie helping you make those rooms sing. Today's style tip. When it comes to making a statement, treat bold patterns like neutrals. Go wild, like an untamed animal print area rug under a rustic farmhouse table from Wayfair.com. Arr, fierce. This has been your Wayfair style tip to keep those interiors superior.
Wayfair, every style, every home.